Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod. This week, we have big executive orders on retirement accounts and debanking, Senate market structure, bill negotiations, AI in the courts, peanut butter, watermelon, and Bitcoin, care of Commissioner Peirce at the SEC, a major White House departure, some interesting, bad, confusing, maybe yet to be clarified remarks from the Treasury Secretary. We'll go through all of it. Remember to follow me on X at MorganSternNJ. Follow the pod on Rumble, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Okay, Zach, let's dive in.
Well, let's start, I think, on the last topic, this sort of breaking news. There was an interesting interview that Treasury Secretary Bessent had with Maria Bartiromo, as a former radio host used to call her, that the U.S. will not be buying Bitcoin. They'll be holding what they'll have. They'll confiscate more. Seems like it's kind of mixed messages from what we thought we would get from a strategic Bitcoin reserve. But what's kind of the latest on that, Brian?
Well, I first want to say this was part of a longer interview and was just one kind of almost an offhand remark, but it jumped out and a lot of people noticed it. It is really making the rounds on Twitter right now. So the secretary said that they are holding the Bitcoin that they have seized through criminal investigations, and that they will not be selling it anymore. He estimates they have 15 to 20 billion in Bitcoin to seed this strategic reserve. So he didn't say the strategic reserve is going away. He did say we're not going to be buying more Bitcoin. Now, that's sort of, it goes against what has been said previously by administration officials, like the recently departed Hines, who had said they want to be buying as much as possible through budget neutral means. There's been a big discussion on monetizing America's assets. It doesn't, if you're really kind of parsing it, or you think he was kind of thinking some steps ahead, it doesn't foreclose the possibility of the government mining Bitcoin. The government has a lot of energy assets that are underutilized. There's always the possibility that they would mine it. There could be other clarifications to come. We don't really know. This just happened this morning. It is breaking and developing news. But I think a lot of Bitcoiners are disappointed because they think it is a good idea for the United States to build a robust strategic Bitcoin reserve, not just have it and hold it, but to keep building it, because it is, the best performing asset of the last decade. It is the modern sort of gold depository as we're envisioning it. El Salvador is doing it with great effect. Other sovereigns are looking into it. So it's not viewed as a positive comment. I'll put it that way. People are not very excited to hear that. I think it warrants further clarification from the secretary from here. I'll say that. So again, the news this morning, Secretary Bessent saying the U.S. is holding Bitcoin, getting started with their Bitcoin strategic reserve. He estimates 15 to 20 billion dollars in Bitcoin that the government holds, but he said that the government will not be buying additional Bitcoin. That is news. Does that mean they couldn't acquire it through other means like utilizing energy assets and mining it? Doesn't seem to eliminate the possibility. It does sort of throw a wet blanket on the original enthusiasm from the administration for this idea of building the asset side of the balance sheet for the United States. So interesting, sort of negative, kind of confusing news this morning about the Bitcoin strategic reserve. More to come. We'll see. We're recording this on Thursday morning. Maybe there'll be new news by the time you're listening to this podcast. So pay attention to X and we'll see what happens.
Yep. And probably, and we're recording this in the morning, so probably by Thursday afternoon, the president will put out a tweet that says, we're going to buy all the Bitcoin. We'll find out. It is, and this is, this is like it kind of feels like we're covering like a high speed chase or something like that. It's we're on LA television and we're things are moving, developing fastly. They're developing fastly, developing quickly. So tune in. We'll see how this story develops. It is promising, as you said, that we're holding, we're not getting rid of. Sounds like we have a substantial, number of coins that we're holding, but that is big news if that's true. So we will continue to follow that here on the podcast. Switching over to executive orders, the administration is just on a tear. So Bitcoin was closing back in on 1,000 again. I came across a funny meme that I'll put up here. It's Homer Simpson in a crown with a bunch of jewels, and the captions are like, "What it feels like to own zero point 0.1 Bitcoin and believe I'm a future king." And for Americans and investors, that might not be a joke, but a reality, because as we mentioned, the Trump administration just keeps cranking out some amazing reports and executive orders, notwithstanding the news that we learned this morning. But so on the heels of the AI action plan, they did a data center executive order, then the digital asset report. The administration released executive orders on retirement accounts and debanking. So the first executive order was entitled Democratizing Access to Alternative Assets, 401k Investors. Nice title. So, Brian, let's discuss the retirement accounts executive order first. What is in this executive order, and why is it significant for everyday investors?
Sure. So, interesting timing that Bitcoin hit a new all-time high yesterday, and I think it hit $124,000 per coin. Usually when it hits an all-time high, there's some profit harvesting, and that is what has happened. It has dropped a little bit since then, but interesting timing. So this executive order, I think, is excellent because it gives investors, retirement savers, more optionality. I'm a freedom maximalist when it comes to these sorts of things. And so this is a positive development. It directs the Department of Labor to redefine qualified assets under retirement account rules. It impacts employer-sponsored defined contribution plans. I think your 401k, for example. It allows investments in cryptocurrency and private equity. It's about time. These things shouldn't only be available to rich people. They should be available to anyone. It allows more freedom for investors. It is, of course, good for Bitcoin because the supply remains static and the demand will go up. This then can become a self-fulfilling prophecy that's good for everyone, good for investors. I have long not understood a lot of the nanny state limitations placed on investors. I've heard a variety of possible solutions, ranging from what the administration is doing, which is great, opening up, loosening the regulations, deregulating, allowing people more options for investing, to also changing the parameters of a qualified investor, for example. Currently, there's a net worth threshold. I think it should be more perhaps an exam, like a civilian licensing exam, different from what a wealth advisor would have to pass. Generally, I think this is, a free society should be more of a buyer beware society. Let people experiment, let people fail, let people win and get outsized returns if they're willing to take risks. So look, I think this is a good common sense deregulatory action that hopefully, now I think there's some steps between the EO and ultimately a policy outcome, but I think ordering the department to re-examine these things, I think it signals the direction they're heading in, which is more freedom for investors. And that is a positive thing. It's going to democratize, as the order says, but it's going to give people more options. It's going to allow people, it's going to eliminate some of the moat around the traditional investment vehicles and allow people to shift their investment vision from the past and what has traditionally been worked in a conservative way, small c conservative way, to where are things going now? Growth of startups, the growth of crypto, the growth in various companies involved in the digital future with AI, HPC. A lot of these companies, a lot of the really great companies, they might not be publicly traded. There might be a private equity component. The fact that you can't buy Bitcoin, its market cap just surpassed Google, and you're not allowed to have any in your 401k. Come on. So I think this executive order is a good one. It is, I mean, I can't say it's overdue. The administration is only 7 months old. It's overdue for the country, though. This is something that should have happened years ago. So finally, very glad to see it.
Yeah, that is a nice thing to see. I look at, the differences. We've got, 401ks, my my wife and I do through over, various employers that we've had. And then, you'll have like a Roth IRA, and it is amazing. We do have a lot of options within our respective 401ks, but it's a limited number of options. And so, as you said, it kind of gives people more flexibility to explore different options. I think it's very, very exciting. And as you said, very overdue. Another overdue executive order was on debanking, which you guys have discussed, frankly, on this podcast for years. The one thing I've got to be honest about, I was very surprised at how unspicy the title was, like guaranteeing fair banking for all Americans. Like, I agree with that, but it's not like, choking out Operation Choke Point or, some clever thing that should have called in Dana White to help name this or something. But on a serious note, Brian, what is in that executive order, and why is that executive order so important?
So removing reputational risk is something that's been talked about a lot. Reputational risk is something that the Obama administration, I think, started to focus on back in like 2014. It's a crutch that many financial institutions leaned upon when debanking people they didn't like. There were religious institutions, there were conservative political organizations, there were crypto companies, there were individuals, including members of the Trump family, who were debanked because of what I like to call cooties. It's like, oh, they have cooties, so we don't want to hold their money. That is un-American. So I think getting rid of that is very, very important. And I think we saw Bank of America eliminate that bit of criteria from their processes. That's a positive step. I worry that there's still exceptions that you could drive a Mack truck through. But here comes, kind of the rest of the EO, which is they're saying that the bank regulators are going to have to take action. They're going to have to tell the banks to offer accounts to previously debanked customers. They're going to do an investigation into bank policies. They're going to look at the religious discrimination I talked about. Former Senator and Ambassador Sam Brownback famously wrote an op-ed describing his debanking experience for a religious nonprofit organization that was it was unconscionable. They'll look into that. They'll look into the conservative groups that were debanked, and the Treasury Department's being tasked with developing a more comprehensive strategy to stop debanking. The bank regulators are going to have to dig into this. They've already started revoking some of the old rules that allowed debanking. But when we think bank regulators, we're thinking of the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, the comptroller of the currency, known as the OCC. For credit unions, it's the NCUA, National Credit Union Administration. The CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is, sort of ridiculous and shouldn't exist. It was introduced by Senator Elizabeth Warren and is her little fiefdom that basically extracts fines from companies they don't like. But they've had a big role in bank regulation. The Small Business Administration as well looped into this because they do so much with banks and their 7A loan program. So here's why it's important. You cannot expect debanking to go away forever if you never have accountability for the people who did it in the first place. So changing the rules so it doesn't happen anymore, that's good. But this was an ideological war waged by the left on people they didn't like. And it wasn't just left versus right. It wasn't just liberals versus conservatives. It was also incumbents versus disruptors. And that's what we saw. We saw the political angle. You saw it in Canada with the truckers protesting vaccine mandates. That's probably the most famous example. The president has cited his family members. There were some, MAGA-aligned political organizations that were debanked. There was Senator Brownback and his religious organizations that were debanked. I know personally many people who hold digital assets or who work for digital asset companies who were debanked or their companies were debanked. So it's a very broad and sweeping situation that needs to be corrected. You cannot have people removed from the financial system because they disagree with you. They might, and they're lawful, they're legitimate. You can't have that. People who disagree with you for politics, or in the case of digital assets, people who are disrupting the legacy financial system in a positive way, disintermediating it, empowering individuals. Well, they were weaponizing the regulatory state against their political opponents and against people who might disrupt their business. That is un-American. It has to stop. And if you're going to prevent it from happening again, you have to hold the people accountable who did it in the first place. This is how we went from Operation 1.0 to Operation 2.0. It was the swing of the political pendulum. Debanking was viewed as okay under a Democrat administration. President Trump's first term came in, they ended it, but they didn't hold people accountable. They just changed the policy. Swung back to the Biden administration, here comes debanking again. So we've seen the movie. We know how it goes. Now it is time to put an end to debanking forever. And the only way you do that is by what the Trump administration is doing. You go in with a fulsome investigation, you figure out what people were doing wrong, you identify those people, you hold them accountable, you sue them or charge them with crimes or remove them from their jobs or whatever needs to happen to show that this is not okay. It can never, ever happen again, because we already saw it come back once. Fool me once, shame on me. You're right. Or shame on you. Fool me twice. To quote George W. Bush, I ain't going to get fooled again. So it is time to not get fooled again. And that's what this EO is all about. And I'm very glad to see it.
Yeah, this is very consequential, and this is, I think maybe some people got tired of hearing the term the swamp. It's sort of 2015, 2016 political phraseology, but these are the remaining vestiges of the swamp that need to be drained, ripped out root and branch, whatever kind of metaphor that you want to use. This is really consequential, and I hope that is not lost, on the listeners and the viewers. It's fundamental to how people interact, speak, engage in commerce. So very positive development. Well, while the administration is doing all the great things they're doing, Congress is in recess, but they're still doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So the Senate Banking Committee put out an RFI on their market structure draft. The deadline for that RFI was last week. That is the securities or the sort of SEC portion of the bill. And then the Senate Ag Committee also has some work to do on the commodities or the CFTC portion of the bill. We'll have to have AI put in, define all of these acronyms we're using today. Very acronym and jargon heavy episode for any new viewers. Brian, with this RFI, what was Riot and our partners at the Digital Chamber? What were our contributions to that RFI? And then what do we expect on market structure in the coming weeks and months in the Senate?
Sure. So there's a couple of pieces of the current discussion draft that we weighed in on. We like the fact that the House version, in a way, the Senate version has included a couple of key points. So one is the Keep Your Coins Act, which is a Congressman Warren Davidson initiative that protects peer-to-peer transfers and self-custody. Very, very important for freedom. I think of a digital wallet or a software or hardware wallet for your Bitcoin where you're not using a bank or an institution. I think of that as cash in your pocket. We should still be able to have cash in our pocket in America. So the Keep Your Coins Act, as Bitcoiners know, not your keys, not your coins. So the ability for self-sovereignty and the fact that you don't necessarily need a bank or a government to let you hold your own money. So the Keep Your Coins Act piece is important. And we weighed in on the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, which is a Congressman Tom Emmer, the great Tom Emmer, an initiative from him, which clarifies that, for example, Bitcoin miners who don't possess any customer assets are not to be treated like a financial institution, a money transmitter, a broker, et cetera, because they're not serving customers. They're not holding someone else's assets. So that kind of clarity is going to be very important for Bitcoiners and others in the digital asset space. In terms of what comes next, look, we don't have the Agriculture Committee's piece of it yet, so it's a little hard to tell. I will say they're going to try to get something done in September. It's going to be a very heavy lift. For the market structure components, we're seeing different business models start to weigh in different ways, and there might be a little bit of VC on VC violence, venture capital disagreements on certain aspects of how the market should be structured. And so it is not going to be super easy to iron out those differences, but that is going to be kind of the bellwether to look at whether companies like Paradigm or Andreessen Horowitz that are backing a lot of the up-and-comers in the space, whether they get comfortable with the language, because they do have important voices in these debates. So that is something I'm looking at to see whether sufficient progress will actually be made to get a bill through the Senate this fall, like the president wants. He wanted it done actually before the August recess. They got Genius Act done, didn't quite get to the Clarity Act piece or the market structure piece in the Senate. They got it through the House. The Senate is now working on it, trying to get something that will get 60 votes. And for me, the bellwether is whether the VCs can come together and agree on certain details. And if they can, I think you will have a big enough bipartisan majority to get it done. If it takes more time, I worry that the momentum will kind of falter. So that is my outlook for now. We'll see what happens. Glad to see they're working hard on it and that they're treating it like a priority.
Yeah, they are putting the time into this, and I know there is a lot of a rush of, hey, let's just pass clarity, much bigger bill. This portion of it is that the Senate Banking Committee put out as a smaller portion. The Ag Committee will be a significant portion, but it seems like the process is moving forward in the right way. They have a timeline, they have a plan, they have goals, and getting to that magic number 60 over in the Senate will be important. All right, well, let's switch over to, I'm just going to say this is going to be the coolest title for a segment we'll probably ever do in this show. Hopefully not, but peanut butter, watermelon, and Bitcoin. So only on a nerdy podcast like this can we talk about an SEC commissioner's speech at a university where the sort of the lead or the hook of the speech is peanut butter on watermelon. She talked about the third party doctrine, the interplay with 21st century digital assets, but that's exactly what we're going to do. And I want to say cheers to Grok for making this graphic that we'll put up here in about 5 seconds in one prompt. Plugged it into a lot of different models. Grok came out with this picture. It's pretty funny. So Commissioner Hester Peirce gave a speech at UC Berkeley in early August entitled Peanut Butter and Watermelons, Financial Privacy in the Digital Age. I hope this turns into a law review article, because whatever law journal gets to post that is gonna have its credibility go way up, or maybe its cool factor, let's say. So I want to read just 2 excerpts. It's going to take a minute, but they were just really fascinating, just so well said. So the first is, quote, "We should take concrete steps to protect people's ability not only to communicate privately, but to transfer value privately, as they could have done with physical coins in the days in which the Fourth Amendment was crafted." That is such a profound point. And again, only in certain nerdy legal circles does that appeal to originalism get people excited, but it gets me excited. And then second, this is a little longer excerpt, but this is how she closes the speech. "Most fears of financial privacy and the technology that enables it flow from a genuine desire to protect this nation from enemies and criminals. Safeguarding our families, communities, and country from harm is extremely important. But curtailing financial privacy and impeding disintermediating technologies are the wrong approach. Denying people financial privacy, whether through sweeping surveillance programs or restrictions on privacy-protecting technologies, undermines the fabric and freedoms of our family, communities, and nation. The American people and their government should guard zealously people's right to live private lives and to use technologies that enable them to do so." Wow. So there's a lot more in that speech, Brian, that is spot on. But what do you make of just that point, those 2 points right there?
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner Peirce is right on. I think I should first point out how she came up with the title of Peanut Butter and Watermelon, Financial Privacy in the Digital Age. Her grandfather did not particularly like watermelon, but everybody eats watermelon in the summer. So to make it taste better to him, he spread peanut butter on it. And all the neighborhood kids remembered that. And one of those kids became a telephone operator. Back when we had operators, you'd pick up the phone and say, "Operator, connect me to so-and-so." And one of those operators recognized him on the phone and said, "Are you the Mr. Peirce who put peanut butter on his watermelon?" And her point was, with that cute anecdote, that because we had intermediaries helping with our phone calls, that person now knew who he was calling and might be able to glean information about what they were talking about. Maybe it was supposed to be a private conversation. Maybe that operator shouldn't be privy to that information. So the cute anecdote is very relatable today. And when she talks about transferring value, disintermediating technology to ensure privacy. Look, we just did a segment on debanking. And when banks or governments can see your transactions, there's always the potential that they can then stop those transactions or limit your freedom in some way. Certainly limit your privacy. In the third party doctrine, for people who are not familiar, most people talk about it in the context of the Bank Secrecy Act, where banks are required to submit SARs, suspicious activity reports, to the government when they see transactions that look a little hanky. There are millions of these things submitted to the government. Almost all of them are not actually illicit in any way, but the third party doctrine suggests that you essentially waive your Fourth Amendment rights to searches and seizures by having your data, your financial information, in the possession of a third party. That has been troubling to Bitcoiners and libertarians for a long time. It should be troubling really to mainstream everyone. It's a pretty alarming doctrine. I think it exploded really with the Patriot Act after 9/11 for understandable reasons. We're trying to stop the financing of terrorism, and I think Commissioner Peirce alludes to that. But the surveillance state has grown in very troubling ways, and we saw the way it played out with the debanking scandal over the last number of years. So her point is a good one, that if people want to have cash under their mattress, they should be allowed to have cash under their mattress. If they want to have a cold storage for their Bitcoin, they should be able to have a wallet that's not connected to the internet. And it's nobody's business, right? Generally speaking. Having privacy does not mean you're hiding crimes. It might just mean you're protecting your family. Let's say you're a really, OG, great Bitcoiner who has like $1 billion, and you don't want people to know that because you don't want to be a kidnapping risk or a ransom, risk or an extortion risk or whatever it may be. You just want to protect your family. You want some privacy. You should be able to have that privacy. So, and going back to, her point about originalism and the Fourth Amendment, yeah, think about it. I mean, people would have like sacks of gold coins or whatever they had in the colonial days, or the 13 different currencies that all the colonies had. We're talking about literal cash in your pocket. So this idea that all of the privacy that was inherent at the time of the Constitution should just go away is misguided. So I loved Commissioner Peirce's speech. I think they're absolutely great points. And she's right. If you can communicate privately, just, meet up in person or have a phone call that's not being wiretapped. You should be able to have cash in your pocket and hand it to somebody just the way we have done for thousands and thousands of years. The disintermediating technology is making that sort of interaction, peer-to-peer interactions, more efficient. But it is important to, with those efficiencies, also protect people's privacy and their freedom. So great point. I love the cute anecdote to illustrate it. And I don't know, those are my initial thoughts. What else do you have to say about it? It's a profound speech in a very cute way, which is characteristic of Commissioner Peirce. She's very smart.
Yes, it is. It is very profound. And I think, we sometimes, we focus a lot, on, hey, what's happening in Congress, what's happening in the Twitterverse and all these things. But it is kind of a fun thing to step back and look at like really like a very nerdy, but like very well reasoned and sound legal argument about, you go back and you look at what was the original meaning of these terms at the time that the Constitution was adopted or that the amendments were ratified, and how do you take principles that applied perhaps even from the common law 500 years before that, how do you apply that to telephone operators and pen registers and phone records and internet searches and GPS trackers on your phones and the type of digital currencies that you transact in? It's really important that we recognize the importance of the courts, in this process and ensuring that, I think that the legacy of the Trump 45 administration, and hopefully they'll get moving here in 47 with getting some judges confirmed. I think there's going to be, I think there's going to be a lasting legacy and impact. And I think as a lot of these 21st century technologies are adjudicated in the courts, hopefully they'll have those freedom-y, privacy-based, liberty-focused principles in mind as they adjudicate things. So truly, I hope they turn it into a law review article. I love it. Well, on the topic of the courts, I came across an interesting article in the MIT Technology Review about the use of AI in the justice system. And so this article was specifically about judges who have been early adopters of AI. So there's federal judges and magistrates who have used it for case summaries, timelines, developing questions to ask attorneys, summarizing complex technical issues, and more. And to be fair, there are plenty of stories out there, and they mention it in the article, esteemed lawyers and even law professors that use AI and they cite fake cases and the like. But Brian, as a lawyer, just kind of stepping back, what are your thoughts on the use of AI in the broader justice system? That could be from cops on the street to lawyers representing clients, judges, court reporters, indigent or self-represented defendants. What are your broader thoughts about using AI in the justice system?
Well, first of all, overall, broad brush, it's great because it's creating so many efficiencies. There has been a problem for generations with our courts being too clogged and process being too expensive and too inefficient for people to actually vindicate their rights in a court. So the fact that you can sift through mountains of case files, you can arrive at a chronology, a factual timeline faster, you can do the legal research faster, judges can issue decisions faster. All of this is going to help more people have their rights enforced faster. So overall, great. When I first started practicing law, I mean, a lot of my time was spent on document review, just clicking through piles of scanned documents, figuring out, is it relevant? Is it not relevant? Is it privileged or not privileged? And then you go back and you have to read it. You have to make various judgments. It took forever.
And
that's
document dumps are real.
Yeah, cases would last for years. I had colleagues, I practiced for 7 years in a law firm. I had colleagues who worked on one case for 7 years. I mean, that's absurd. It's not only soul sucking for the lawyer, it's bad for the clients, it's bad for justice. You don't actually get any results. So creating more efficiencies in the court system is going to lead to a more efficient society because your litigation and legal risks are going to stop holding back growth for the economy, for people's careers, for people's well-being. It's going to help people enforce their rights more often, faster. That's going to be excellent. That said, and it will, democratize law a little bit. A lot of people can't afford a lawyer, so they end up representing themselves or filing paperwork themselves. This will help them do it in a more professional way. Judges may take pro se litigants a little bit more seriously because they'll have better access to legal information. So for all these reasons, I think it's going to have the effect of democratizing justice and getting justice faster for people and more frequently. That's a positive thing. That said, there's growing pains right now. The article talks about how various lawyers and judges may be a little trigger happy. And so they may have some hallucinations, fake case citations. They might get to the wrong result because they move too quickly. That, for me, is going to be resolved in two ways. It's a temporary problem. It'll be resolved in two ways. One, they're going to learn their lesson and they're going to check the citations and information that the AI gives you. I already do that. If I ask AI a question, I then look at the source documents. I do a whole bunch of spot checks and I figure out, okay, this is accurate or not accurate. I just read articles about how ChatGPT 5, which has various models incorporated into it, if a prompt sends it down the wrong rabbit hole, it may come back with the wrong information. So you still have to do your homework, and you have to check, and you have to make sure that what's coming out is accurate and that it's done as well as it should be done. And the other way is these things are continually improving every day. And so the models will get better, and the information they spit out will get more accurate. And it'll be better writing, it'll be more accurate, it'll be properly cited. So the advancement of the technology itself will help. And once you've been sanctioned by a court, if you're a lawyer or if you're a judge who had to withdraw an opinion and reissue it, I feel like once you learn that lesson once, you probably don't have to learn it again. So I think that'll improve. I just view this as growing pains. Overall, I think the impact on our justice system is overall, there are always exceptions, but overall it's going to be profoundly positive. It's going to help create a more efficient society where dollars are going to be poured into growing goods and services and new ideas, and less will be dedicated to lawyers fighting and pushing paper back and forth. And I think that's a good thing.
It's going to be good for court staff, administrators, scheduling, docket clearing. One of the things, I can't remember if it was in the article, but it's something that has just for some reason been near and dear to my heart, is translation services and court reporters. There's a significant need in those fields to serve litigants. So if AI can be used to assist in those things, and again, it's a matter of not relying on it blindly, but using it as a tool. You had, I don't know if he still does this, but I think John Roberts always said he wants to sit down with a yellow pad and like write out his opinions or whatever. Adopting these technologies, there's already rules, that courts have in place for, judging, evidence, rules of evidence that are this thick that can be used to apply to these things. So is interesting, positive development, but it was cool to have an article written about it, talk about, it's dialectic. Here are the pros and the cons. Here's what people are doing. Here's how it's benefiting people. So just another, hopefully for our viewers, another cool application of AI that can be used for positive things in the future. So for our final substantive segment, we'll end on a bittersweet note, but White House crypto advisor Bo Hines announced that he is stepping down from his position at the White House and heading back to the private sector. Welcome back. He did serve as the head of the Council of Advisors on Digital Assets. So, Brent, I never met Bo Hines, but I know you've engaged with him before. What are your thoughts on his impact at the White House, and where does this leave the administration going forward?
Yeah, I met Bo several times, met with him at length one time in the White House. I found him to be straightforward, smart, wise beyond his years. He's a young guy. He's only like 30 years old, but is kind of an OG Bitcoiner. Got into it, I think, when he was in college. He always had a bias towards action, and I think you saw that in the executive orders that came out during the first week of the administration. He's always bullish on Bitcoin. He had a very good way about him, which is important to have an assertive but patient personality in a role like that. Executive director of this council, of course, the chair is David Sachs, because in that role, he had to deal with the interagency labyrinth, the bureaucratic morass. There are so many agencies involved in this space. He had to be very diplomatic with all of them and all the industry players, some of whom have divergent interests. And I think he built a reputation as someone that all of them could trust to shoot them straight and share, you never had to guess what he thought or what his opinion was or what his goals were. So I thought he did quite well. I understand it's a grueling job, and it was really supposed to be temporary from the beginning. Slight surprise that he left before they got the market structure bill done, or before we had more details on the Bitcoin strategic reserve and some other issues. That said, he did a lot in his time there. Helps to end Operation Choke Point and the debanking problem. He helped to get the Bitcoin strategic reserve off the ground. He played a key role in getting the Genius Act across the finish line. He helped to get the Clarity Act past the House, these executive orders that we've just seen on debanking and deregulating for retirement accounts so people have more optionality. I think it's likely he played a role in all these things. So a tremendous list of accomplishments in a very short time by a very young guy. So very impressed with him. Wish him all the best. I know he's staying on as a special government employee to help kind of transition the administration's Digital Asset Policy Council in the aftermath of his departure. But really sharp guy. I was impressed. I liked him personally, very friendly and always bullish. And we like that. So great job. And I am hopeful that now that he is out the door, that we will continue to have this cavalcade, this avalanche of wonderful policy announcements and keep the momentum going. But, it's a big loss to see Bo leave, but I'm hopeful that the administration's momentum will continue to be strong even as he returns to the private sector. I know he has a baby at home and, we all have personal life demands. And these jobs, I worked in the White House. It is grueling. It is all consuming. So I don't fault anybody for identifying a good time to transition back to private life. So congratulations and best wishes to Bo.
Yes. And, they have a deep bench over at the White House. So, to put it in, football metaphors, him being a former football player, next man up. And they'll have a great bench. But no, it's amazing at the White House how many people wear so many different hats. You have Secretary Rubio and it's like interim national security advisor. I read an article yesterday. So Sean Duffy is the transportation secretary, but he was speaking in his role as like the acting administrator of NASA, that they want to put like a nuclear power plant on the moon or something like that. It's just amazing all the different hats that people wear in the administration, all in the service of the American people. So best of luck to Bo Hines. So for the final segment, we'll end in our traditional way with the grab bag segment. And my item of the week is saying rest in peace to dial up internet. So that right there was the sound of my childhood. That dial up tone, it's like nostalgic and PTSD all at the same time. So AOL, which apparently is also still around, but it announced that it will be discontinuing offering its dial-up internet service at the end of September after 34 years. So amazingly, there were 1.5 million users that had dial-up in 2015, but by 2021, that number was down into, quote, the low thousands. And it's hard to imagine living with dial-up speeds in 2025. Like we're running 1+ gigabit fiber here in Austin, Texas. But there are a lot of other options out there. Satellite, people love Starlink here in Texas, an Elon Musk, company, but it is kind of a sad goodbye. So goodbye and rest in peace, love internet.
My sister and I still occasionally, if something pops up on our timelines that reminds us or whatever, we'll just start making that noise at each other. The ee-aw, ee-aw. And it is a very fond memory. R.I.P. I think it's time, to be honest. It's like the schmoopy voice from, or not schmoopy voice from Seinfeld, the hello, where for any Seinfeld fans out there, when Jerry was making a very funny voice, and he just kept doing it over and over, and it was funny for a while until Kramer finally said, it's played. I think the ee-aw is played. So R.I.P. But I do have some nostalgia for it. My grab bag item is, so the Terminal List, based on the books by Jack Carr, it was phenomenal. It's like the best series I think I've watched in years. And the next season is called Terminal List Dark Wolf. So they had an in-person premiere with the cast recently. It will be on Amazon Prime. August 27th, I believe, is the release date. So putting up one of the hype videos for the new series.
You had to shoot him to end the fight.
It's awesome. It's about Navy SEALs. The original Terminal List sparked a series of, I think it was 7 books. There may be an 8th book out now. I read the entire series of books in like under a month. And I don't read a lot of full books. I read a ton of news. I get through a few books a year at least, but I don't usually read like 7 or 8 books in a single month. I know some people do. I don't usually, but I did for this series because it just is captivating. It just sucks you in. You can't put it down. It's phenomenal. So about Navy SEALs and a lot of the trials and tribulations with the defense industrial complex and politicians and corruption of the system. It's like very timely for this moment, this era that we are currently living in. The next iteration, next series of the Terminal List Dark Wolf, comes out August 27th on Amazon Prime. I will be watching as soon thereafter as I possibly can because the show is awesome and the characters are awesome. So, and congratulations to Jack Carr on another successful series. That is my grab bag item for today. So that is all for this week's episode. Thanks everybody for joining us. A lot to unpack this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember to follow me on X at MorganSternNJ. Subscribe to the pod on Rumble, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Reach out to us if you have questions, comments, any feedback. We'd be happy to hear it. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod. Thanks, everybody.